Hey.
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 Let's talk.
Let's talk on Fridays.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Hey, Let's Talk on Fridays. I'm Donnie Rolls, and we've got a special show for you today. We're talking with Beth Nelson, a woman who led by all accounts, a normal life, had a husband, kids, a house, jobs, until drug addiction took over for both her and her husband, led to her husband's suicide, led to her subsequent addiction, and then led to her being homeless. And then after that, a series of events happened, and she came out the other side. So we've got a really interesting story and show for you today. Joining me now is Beth Nelson. So Beth, thank you very much for joining me.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
And so, I think when people hear about somebody who was homeless, I think what's really interesting is the fact that, there was a time when you had everything that most people think that you need to be happy in this life. You had a house, you had jobs, you had a husband, you had a child. So can you kind of paint the picture for me about what life was like, early on?
My life was probably just about like anybody else's. Went to school, got married, had children, had mortgages, had cars and fun things to ride, and took vacations. I think it's just about like anybody who might be watching this program. Never dreamt it would be any different, only thought it was going to get better.
And so, and then at some point, there was a drug addiction that happened. Can you tell me how the drug addiction started and then how it played itself out? Sure.
My husband and I both were moderate drinkers and moderate marijuana users, and eventually in about 2002 he decided he wanted to drive truck, and at that point we both quit. It was you just cannot continue marijuana use if you're going to be out on the road. And so I thought it was a done deal, and we actually bought a house that year. I thought we were saving money. Everything was great. Moved to a new home, and I did not know that he had picked up a cocaine habit. I kept him awake. He was bright and cheery-eyed and could truck long hours, and I didn't even know that was going on until one day I think he wanted to use it home open and freely, and so he told me about it, and I joined right in. I mean, I probably have somewhat of an addictive personality, and if we were going to spend our hard-earned money, I was going to get in on the deal, and from there everything spiraled.
How does a cocaine addiction, how does that play itself out? How does it change how you are in your relationship with each other? How does that...
Cocaine's a very selfish drug to be addicted to. Your cravings are for the taste. Your cravings are for the high. The high does not last long. It is not a drug that you can take and within an hour you're craving more. And if you use it recreationally and put it down and walk away is one thing, but when you're using it becoming daily, you quit paying your bills because it's an expensive habit, and you quit. You start fighting over money. Where's the money going to come from? Who's paying the mortgage, and what's not going to get paid this month? And our relationship suffered horribly. And my relationship with my children, and I have 2 children. We would shut the door and lock the door and sit in the bedroom for hours. For hours would go by. Because then they were adult children, but you just, your sense of reality and time, oh my gosh, you've been up for 20 hours, it just flies by. Your reality really gets messed up, and so the fight was on. You fight with your partner.
So are you still working?
I was still working. It's an expensive drug, and I made a lot of money. I had gone to school for computer programming back in 1988, and so I had a steady job that I made a lot of money.
And so the two of you then begin to fight. Can you talk about how that spiraled down?
Well, it just becomes, because it's a selfish drug, and I had more money than he did, I didn't want to share. I wanted to control how much he was getting, and that just doesn't fly when you're on the other end of that seat. You know, and we had savings. During the good years, you know, I had savings. I had other investments. We were pulling that to get cash. It did not take long. I think we started doing cocaine steady in late 2003, and I left the house in late 2004 because it was just, it didn't take a year for us to, you know, no more phone, no more cable, the internet's cut off, you know, we're missing mortgage payments, the selling stuff. It was horrible. It was horrible, and it had to stop.
And can you tell me about what led you to leave the house, and then what led up to your husband's death, and then your husband's death?
Well, I left the house under mutual. He didn't want me there anymore either. It was my house. I had the income. I had the mortgage, and my daughter, who was 15 at the time, was lived there. My son was older. He was out, and she wanted to stay in the house, and he didn't have nowhere to go. He has no family. So I said, I'll go. I went and moved in with my parents 5 miles away. And so we had communication, and I continued to do my cocaine. I continued to go to work every day. But I refused to go back to the relationship until we did something. And I mean that twofold. We needed addiction help, and we needed marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't unwilling to do that, but I was not willing to move back in. The stress and the frustration of that, I think, got the best of him. A friend of ours had actually died, and so we met up in a bar that day and to talk about the funeral. We were going to go to the funeral together, and we drank and drank. We had the best time.
This is you and your...
Me and my husband had the best time. We ate, and we were doing shots and playing pool. We had the kissing and hugging, had the best time. He dropped me off at my mom and dad's at about 1:30 in the morning, and he called me, and I'm in my pajamas, you know, and he said, I'm going to come and get you. I'm going to come and get you. We got to do this right now. And I said, no, I'm not doing nothing. I'm in my pajamas and I have to work. No, I'm on a gravel road. I'm coming back to get you. I said, go home and call me. Go home. We're drunk. Mm-hmm. So he went home and he called me and he said, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? And I'm like, what? Why aren't you coming back? If you won't come back, take this. And the gun went off. And I heard the phone drop. And I knew immediately. I knew he was dead. He was gun suave, and I knew he wouldn't miss. And he was dead. And he was very drunk, and had been using quite a bit of cocaine when they did the tox report. And in the blink of an eye, everything was gone. Everything was gone. Everything changed. No more house, no more cars, no more toys in the garage, no more dishes to do, no more kids to feed, no more dog to catch. I mean, in the blink of an eye, to me, I lost everything in that moment, and including my mental health. I've always suffered from depression, but this was more of a traumatic shutdown.
Because I mean, at that moment, you really didn't lose. I mean, you still had your job at the time.
Yep, I still had the job.
So you could have maintained the house probably.
I could have. I was doing all that anyway. I could have, except for, the post-traumatic shock of it. I couldn't believe he was dead. I couldn't believe people thought I shot him. People were left horrible things at the funeral, terrible notes about how I murdered him and got by with it. And you're just the confusion, and my only way to cope was to go back to those drugs and that alcohol. And so I continued to use cocaine, and then I really picked up the alcohol use.
Yeah, can you tell me the process? Because you went from living with your parents at that point, and then your husband's death, and then everything kind of went down. Can you tell me about how that went and your mindset and what you cared about, what you didn't care about, and you said you had spent all your money.
Well, I had spent most of my money. I moved back into the house right away. My daughter was there, My daughter was in the other room when he shot himself, so, you know, we had her and I clung tight. And I did have some insurance on him, so that was going to come in. So I moved back into the house. I was mad. I just remember having blinders on. I could barely see here, and I knew that my drinking and then once the money came, that cocaine habit kicked back up again, that I couldn't work. I was not doing a good job. I was using on the road. I was using while I was at work, and it was interfering. Work was interfering, honestly, and I just said, I'm never coming back again. I remember waking up that day and thinking, I'm not going back there ever again, and I better tell them. So it spiraled, and within a year, my house was in foreclosure. To me, all that money was blood money. To me, everything we had was crap. I'd worked for a house, I'd worked for four-wheelers, I'd worked for lawnmowers, I'd worked for cars, and to me, that was crap. If he could do that, then everything else felt meaningless. The house, I didn't want the house. Why would I want the house my husband killed himself in? Why would I want the money I saved for our retirement?
So it's like you associated everything that you had with your husband, and because it had an association with it, you said, I don't want any of it.
I don't want any of it.
So how did you end up homeless? How do you go from how does that work?
Well, I lived in the home, but I quit paying the bills. I just drank and partied. And so I think it was in March of 2005, my house went into foreclosure, and within 6 months they kicked me out and locked the door. And at that point I was homeless. I was using so heavily. My family, I have wonderful family, mother and father, 5 sisters, did not want, they would feed me, of course, but they did not want any longevity with me whatsoever. Ended up staying with people, not so good people. We all kind of took advantage of each other. And when and winter was coming, I broke into that house several times and would stay, no heat, no electricity, but at least I was safe. I could sleep and I was safe, Part of when you're homeless is being safe. Sleeping out on the highway, of course, isn't safe. Sleeping on a bench in the park isn't safe. Finding a creepy friend isn't safe. Being alone in my own foreclosed home is safe. So I did that, got a few DWIs during that time. Eventually, I ended up court-ordered into treatment, and that was January of 2007, and I came to Rochester and went into a halfway house.
So you spent some time homeless, both over near Faribault and then also here in Rochester.
Right.
So can you tell me, because we all know, we've all seen people who are homeless, we all, we've been exposed to that. Can you tell me about what it's like to be homeless in Rochester?
It's heartbreaking. You're lucky to be homeless in Rochester if you got to be homeless. But being a person who is homeless is truly heartbreaking. And when my husband died and the blinders went on, when I came to light that I had no place to live, the same pattern of behavior began again, where you only focus on your immediate needs. Where am I going to get food? Can I find a bottle? Can I get some money to get drunk today? Can I find a tree that will cover me up so nobody can see me? Because even if you nap on the park bench in Rochester, probably the cops are going to pick you up. Where are some other homeless people to give me tips? You forget about finding a job. You forget about a house to live in, or rent to pay, or a car, or having a phone call, because they are so out of your focus. And so when you look at a homeless person on the street and you wonder, why doesn't this person go get a job? Well, and we have day workforce here in Rochester. Well, what is $50 going to do me? Even if I go today and work and walk out of there with a $50 bill, it's not going to pay my rent. I have no place to rent. It's not going to put gas in my car. It's going to give me something to eat. It's going to give me a bottle and a pack of cigarettes. And if I'm lucky, I might pay one of the truck stops to get a shower and sit and have a meal and be legal to sit in McDonald's for 4 hours and drink their coffee. That's what it might get me. The realm of mortgages and electric bills.
You're not thinking. You're just not thinking about that. Yeah. So how did you? I mean, how do you get out of that? You're homeless. You're sleeping on benches and under trees. How did you find your way out? You had to have help from somebody.
Well, like I told you earlier, if you ask me, I have been in recovery since January of 2007 when I first went to treatment. I've been sober since April of 2009. Now, all those years in between and up until now are not wasted time. Just because I relapsed and ended up homeless several times doesn't mean the lessons and the clarity and the hope aren't creeping in. It only takes a crack in the door of light to make you want to step into the light. And that's what the places like the Salvation Army, the places like Dorothy Day, the places like the halfway houses, churches, that's what they're offering a person who is homeless. And so for me, the last time, or the second to the last time I left Pathways, I'd heard about this Castleview Apartments opening, and I walked over. My counselor said, "Walk over. It's just apply." And I really was homeless. I didn't know I was homeless. I didn't understand that concept. To me, homeless isn't me, but I was. And I got an apartment there, and it's just a little one-room place, and it has a kitchen and a bathroom and a bedroom and some windows, and it's mine. It's mine. And from there, once I had a base, once I had a home, I did not decorate that place for 2 years. Not a thing on the wall, not a picture, nothing. Because it was not my home, but I had a base. Then you're free to say, what does a normal person, what did I used to do? I used to work. Oh, maybe now ask for help. How do I get a job? Where can I get a job? How am I going to get there? Can you help me get there? Salvation offers bus passes, free rides, medical help. I mean, the Good Samaritan Dental Clinic and Medical Clinic. So
there's a network of helpers in Rochester that you think are really beneficial. But you also mentioned that there was a situation where you're talking with somebody and they said something to you that really connected and made you realize that you needed to do something to get out of this situation.
Yes. The last treatment center that I went to, but I requested myself, and I said, I need mental health treatment. I can't stop using alcohol. I could not. It was the worst clench on me. I've quit other drugs. I could not stop drinking alcohol. But I said, but my head, you got to help my head. And this counselor had me do some homework, and he said, Beth, the reason you will never recover is because you do not care about yourself. And that was a big slap in the face. Because I cared about if I ate. I cared about if I got alcohol. But you want to know what? He was right. And I cried for several days. I haven't cried in years. I didn't cry when my husband died. I bawled for several days and realized I did not care about this person right here. The one thing I have control over. I didn't care. I didn't care if she slept on the bench. I didn't care if people looked at her badly. So that changed everything.
And so, so now, can you tell me about your life now? Now you've got an apartment, you've got a car, you're working. Can you tell me where you're at right now?
I got an apartment, I got a car, and I'm working. More importantly than that, I feel like I have a purpose. I feel like Beth has got some use, and that use is to tell her story. You place value on events in your life, and I placed a negative value on that event. I placed a wall right there, and for a long time I couldn't see all the good stuff that had happened before his death. I could not see my babies born. I could not see getting promotions. And so So my purpose, or my value to that was a negative 1,000. When I went into recovery and worked my AA recovery program and worked counselor, I go to a counselor, I have for years now, the same one. Went talk to social workers. I was taught that I needed to place a positive value on the most horrid thing that ever happened to me and the horrible time I went through, to give it a positive value, not only so that I could see the rest of my life, my past, which is wonderful. I have a wonderful childhood, wonderful, but to offer that I have purpose, that I have value, and I can help someone else by telling them. And so suddenly my horrible event is a positive event because it might help somebody else.
And and I asked you this one, and is there something about being homeless or about homeless people that you think might be surprising to people who obviously have never been homeless and don't know what it's like?
Well, I don't know. I think a couple of things, they were just like you at one point. They had dreams, they had thoughts, their desire was to have a mortgage and a car and a job. They were no different than anybody else. They lost it somehow, just like I did. One way or another, something happened to them, probably not their choice, and that they desperately don't want to be homeless. They might not know how to live anymore. They might not know how to live, except because they're so here for so long. They don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to have relationships. They don't know how to care about themselves. Because you can't do that when you're homeless. All you can worry about is food, painkillers, and a safe place to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about the mental health issues with homeless people, and they give it a ratio, a percentage, but I would think that the percentage of people with mental illness who are homeless has got to be extremely high. Can you talk about that and about why you'd have mental health issues being homeless?
I would say the biggest factor for me, and I'm going to say probably the biggest factor for at least the people I've met, 80%, is a post-traumatic stress mental illness. An occurrence that they could not cope for one reason or another. Like I said, I was just like anybody else. I was like the housewife up in northwestern Rochester with a home and a mortgage. I was just like everybody else. What happened? Well, something horrible happened that my brain could not cope. I shut down, and the longer you're shut down, I think part of my recovery is that it was only years by the time I got caught back into the society. Some of those people are 10, 15 years. Their reality is so gone that they don't know how anymore. Their post-traumatic has shut them so close. And we need to, as a society, say, I value every member of our society. And this homeless person was somebody, some point in their life, and they desperately want to come back.
And I think that it's also important. We talked about how when you were out and then you had medical bills, you had talked about your medical bills turned out to be extremely expensive. And so, people talk about how we need to take care of ourselves and in personal responsibility, but the taxpayers are paying for homeless people regardless.
Yeah, you are.
And so that's something to be considered. You think that, can you talk about your medical bills that you had?
Yep. I just think that people don't understand that as a homeless person, I don't take care of my teeth and get infection. I end up in the emergency room. You pay for that. If I go to jail, because one of the places to stay warm in the winter is to commit a crime so you can get your butt in jail for 30 days. Who pays for that? We do. So as a society, you, whether you like it or not, are paying for homeless people's medical bills and support in one way or another. Whether you generously donate money or you refuse to, you still are. When I got into this program and got, I tried to commit suicide very seriously, had been trying to commit suicide, was in St. Mary's, and finally I ended up getting into my apartment. I went back to Pathways for a few months and got back to my apartment. they back paid my medical bills to the tune of $54,000. That was 6 months back pay. Now, I live in, for a while there, I couldn't pay my rent, and the county paid my rent. $800 a month, $200 a month food stamps, $150 for my medications. Need to be on those medications, have to be. So we're talking what, $1,000, $1,200 a month. So in a year, $14,000 you supported me versus $54,000 medical bill that in 6 months. So you can either put $100,000 out and in one way or another pay for it, or you can help me get a home, get a base, get on my feet, get on my medications to the tune of $14,000 a year. You're paying for it either way.
Yeah.
In one way, you're going to, now I'm a productive taxpayer. Guess what? I'm back paying taxes. I come full circle. That's what we want to do with our people, the people in Rochester who have no home. We don't want to keep looking at them. We need to get them back into full circle to be a taxpayer.
Yeah.
The more taxpayers, the less homeless, the less we have huge medical bills, and that's a fact. And
at this point in time, you have come full circle. You're working at Graham Arena. You have a house and a place to live, and you have your family, you have your kids that you see with some regularity. So Thanksgiving just passed. What are you most thankful for at this point?
Oh, my sobriety. I know that when you are working to stay sober and you have an addiction to something like that had me, I will have nothing without my sobriety. And that is the utmost important thing. Every morning I wake up, I thank God for my sobriety and what can I do today. And when I go to bed, I thank God for a nice day and I hope I make it through the night. So with that in check, everything else falls into place. The drug addiction distorts you. The minute I drink alcohol, even if I keep working for another 2, eventually I'll end up back where I was. Alcohol, drugs and alcohol are such a distortion, and your thinking is so off balance that ultimately you end up back where you were. So for me, I'm grateful for my sobriety. The rest are just gifts, wonderful gifts that I get.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Beth, for talking to me and coming in.
You're welcome.
And sharing
anytime.
your story. Okay. Okay, and thank you for joining us for Hey, Let's Talk on Fridays. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Hey.
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 Let's talk on Fridays.